Patrick's Day is over. Today is the first day of spring, and we're in the middle of March Madness, which means watching lots of basketball. As I'm filming this, my Wisconsin Badgers are about to start playing tonight. But we watch it even if our teams aren't in it, just because it's so enjoyable, and we have lots of good food while we're doing it. So today I'm going to make some slow roasted pork that's going to go into a giant sub sandwich. So I've got a beautiful pork loin, not a tenderloin because there's no fat on that, and we want a little bit of this fat for the flavor. I've got 1 medium onion sliced, as well as 1/2 teaspoon of either dried shallots or onion powder, whichever you got. I've got 4 cloves of garlic. I just peeled and smashed them, as well as a teaspoon of garlic powder. Then I've got some ground fennel, 1/2 teaspoon, ground rosemary, 1/4 teaspoon. The rosemary can be very strong, so you got to be easy with that. A teaspoon each of oregano and thyme, and a tablespoon of basil. And these three, after measuring them out, I ground them up in my palm to release the oils. And then I'm going to have some salt and pepper, some low sodium chicken broth, and my secret weapon, a cup of cola. Yeah, cola. So the onions, I'm going to saute them a little bit before they go into the crock pot. In testing this recipe, I found that the raw onion flavor really stays present and takes over the dish. And it does not taste good because pork is pretty mild. So I'm going to saute these a little bit before throwing them into the crock pot. And then we'll move on with the recipe. I've got a couple of tablespoons of butter that I've melted into the pan. And I'm going to throw in our onions. And we're just going to saute those till they're just starting to get soft. While the onions were cooking, you notice I added just a little bit of sherry. It just brings a depth of flavor that you can't get from just beef stock. And I cooked it until basically all the sherry has reduced and the alcohol is cooked off. I'm going to put the onions and the garlic into my slow cooker. Spread that out. It's going to be a base for the pork. I'm also going to add my parsley. I'm going to add my bell peppers. Again, you can use whatever kind you like. I tend to stay away from the green bell peppers because they have a stronger and almost bitter flavor. And again, pork is very delicate in its flavor. I don't want to take over the taste of the pork because that's the star of the sandwich. I'm going to take our pork loin and set aside the paper. I'm going to sprinkle it with our seasoning on both sides. So I'm going to put some on here and kind of press it in. Put a little down here so I can get the side. And the other side. And the bottom. I want to make sure it's coated all over so we get ultimate flavor, get the ends, get the sides. And then this is going to go into the slow cooker for 8 hours. Yes, 8 hours. In goes our pork roast. And I'm going to scrape in all this excess that came off when I was flipping. All the extra spices. We're going to add our cola. And I'm going to be careful not to pour it over the top of the roast because I want that seasoning to stay on the top as long as possible. I will be flipping this roast over partway through to make sure that it cooks evenly. And I'm going to add a cup or so of the low sodium beef stock. You only want the liquid to come up halfway, perhaps a little bit past halfway You do not want to immerse the roast because then you'll just be boiling it. And this is a braise. So that looks good. I'm also going to give it a little sprinkling of salt and pepper. I don't want to do too much. I can always add more later, but you do want a little bit of this as you cook it. The pork has been cooking for about 6 hours. I'm going to take it out of the crock pot just for a moment. And to the juices in the crock pot, I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup of passata, which is Italian tomato puree. I've used this in other recipes. It's not cooked other than the heating process for the bottling. So it's super fresh tomato taste. I just want a little bit of that tomato flavor because I am going to save this jus when the pork is done and cook this down to make a sauce. And now I'm going to put it back in. In fact, it's time to turn it over again. I've turned it over about every 2 hours. And I'm going to make sure I put those juices back in. Every bit of goodness. So this has about 2 more hours to cook. The pork roast has cooked for 10 hours. I took it out of the pan. And now I'm just going to pull it apart. You can see it's very tender. I can just take it apart with forks. I reserved the cooking liquid. I'm simmering that right now so it cooks down into a thicker sauce that I can use on the sandwich with the pork. So I'm going to continue to do this, and we'll continue with our sandwich tomorrow. And by the way, Wisconsin won. Yesterday we made the roasted pork for our giant sub. Today we're going to put it all together. First thing I'm going to do is prepare the bread. Now normally I don't buy this kind of bread. It doesn't have a lot of interest, but it works great for what I want to do with this sandwich. So I'm going to make do. When I was growing up in our hometown, there was a place they made great sub sandwiches, and one of their secrets was hollow this out a bit and it'll hold all the meats and cheeses inside, and then I use this for breadcrumbs, or I can make it into croutons for salad. So I'm not going to take it all out. I'm just going part way down. And you notice I cut the bread 1/3, 2/3, so we can have a little deeper well here for our goodies. So as I said, this bread, kind of boring. I like it that the grocery stores used to call it French bread, but now this grocery store actually calls it fresh baked bread, because no Frenchman would ever recognize this as being French bread. All right, so I've got a pretty good well in there. First thing I'm going to do is give this some flavor. I've got some butter at room temperature, and I've got some Parmesan cheese grated, and I'm also going to add a little bit of garlic. I normally use fresh garlic, but for this particular preparation, I like using the jarred garlic. Garlic powder you can use also, but you really won't get that garlic bread flavor, which is what I'm going for. So I'm going to mix this all together, and we'll be right back. I've got my butter all mixed together. Now I'm going to slather this bread with the butter, cheese, and garlic mixture. When I was creating this sub, I was thinking of all the different kinds of subs I've had. You know, you travel around the country, subs are different. Even like an Italian sub is different from New York to Chicago, say. So I thought, I'm just gonna put all the things in here that I like. Number one, good bread. So I'm gonna toast this, and we're gonna have a garlic bread as our base. And I'm gonna take a little bit of this out too, not quite as much as I took out of the other. And that'll give us a domed lid. And that'll help hold in the fillings as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and slather both sides of this with all this butter. And then I'm gonna broil it till the butter is melted and the cheese just starts bubbling up a little bit. And then we'll move on. We've got the bread all buttered. Now one thing before I put this in the oven, this is gonna be a super sub just for myself, my husband, my daughter, my son, and his wife. And then we'll have some salad on the side. But if this is for a basketball watch party, if you cut this end off, take a second loaf and cut that end off, together you will have a really big sub sandwich that you can work with, or you could do two different ones. But this is going to be enough for all of us. So you trust me, when you see how loaded this is, it's enough for the 5 of us. To the broiler we go. Here's our finished bread. You can see the butter is melted, the cheese is a little golden, and it's crusty. And then this is my fixings. Like I said, I've been all over the country, tried all kinds of subs, so I just decided to put together what I like. So, the first thing we're going to do is lay a base in our bread. I'm going to lay down the mortadella. Mortadella is a pork product. The little white parts are actually pork fat, and then the little dots are pistachios. And I'm going to lay a bit of this down first, because when I put the hot pork on, I don't want it to make the bread get soggy. That was the whole point of toasting the bread. So I'm going to lay down about 4 slices of mortadella. Next thing I've got, grated fontina. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the bed. You can use any kind of cheese you like. You can use any kind of meats you like. You could use capicola, you could use pepperoni, the big sliced pepperoni, you could use prosciutto. I'm just using the ones we like. Okay, now on top of that is going to go our hot pork, and it'll melt the cheese, which will be absolutely delicious. Now I'm going to add the hot pork. You remember last night we braised this and I saved the juices and I cooked that down, so it made just a little sauce on this without being too soggy, and it gave it a little extra flavor. You can see that the pork has got sort of a reddish tinge. That's because of the sauce. And then right on top of that, we're going to add some provolone. Now I got the picante provolone because that's what we like, but you can use, again, any cheeses you like. I do like the fontina at the base because it melts nicely. Now, my question was, what else do we put on there? I also have the onions and peppers that I took out of the crock pot last night, and I sauteed those up a little bit more, so they're hot as well. Help melt this cheese. It's got hot pork under it and hot vegetables on top of it. You can add as much or as little as you like. I just like a little bit of the... So it's kind of a combination of a sub sandwich, sausage and peppers, Italian beef, except for, if you didn't notice, everything I've been using is a pork product. So this is some salami. Again, you could use any kind of cold meats, any kind of cheeses, any kind of vegetables. The point is to make 1 or 2 things from scratch, but don't drive yourself crazy. And then the rest of it's going to come from a deli. Now, most of the time on a sub, tomatoes. Often on subs, you'll see vinegar and oil or an Italian vinaigrette. So I combined those two together. I made a quick vinaigrette with just some champagne vinegar olive oil, a little bit of garlic, and some herbs, whatever herbs you like. I've got thyme and basil and oregano in here. And these are little grape tomatoes. And I cut them in halves or quarters depending on the size. And I just marinated them in the vinaigrette, sorry. I'll be right back. We have a grocery town here in Vegas that I go to often. They make fantastic subs. And one of the things I like about their subs, they have a cream cheese spread. And I couldn't decide if I wanted the cream cheese spread or tapenade, which is an olive spread from the south of France. And so I decided I wanted both. So I chopped up some olives, kind of fine. I've got an 8-ounce block of cream cheese and about 6 ounces of sour cream. And then I used just a little bit, about 4 tablespoons of the vinaigrette from the tomatoes. And that's what the spread is made out of. And so now, no lettuce. I just didn't feel like it. This is our super sub, and we're gonna go watch some basketball. Let's get that plated. Gonna give it a little squish. And all I have left to do is cut. I like to cut on the diagonal. I think it's just more attractive. And you can see, even though there's 5 of us, these are some pretty good sized pieces. And like I said, we'll have some chips and salad or veggies with this. Watch basketball again tomorrow. We'll probably have chicken wings, but let's take a look at that. Look at that beautiful sandwich. I can't wait to take a bite. Hope you try this and hope you enjoy March Madness.